Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar event, Putting the Pieces Together, Adding Talent Marketplaces, or Adding Marketplaces to the Talent Game. My name is Brian Pena, and today's event is sponsored by Talentix. I am super excited about this topic. I have been following the rise of marketplaces for some time, and I've seen its growth and I've seen its penetration, and as a truly innovative tool with a lot of enterprises and solving a lot of real talent problems. To that end, this today is something that's very near and dear to my heart, to be able to discuss this complicated topic. And Talentix is one of my favorite partners of mine, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of the learnings that we've had with them over the last couple of years. But before then, let's get right into it and do some housekeeping. So the first thing, we had the speed networking. I think we had great attendance. I was pleasantly surprised by the global nature of the attendees. We'll go into that in just a second. I was able to speak to a couple of people from the US, somebody from Argentina, someone else from India, and then we've got somebody from Germany on the phone. So truly global audience, to kind of giving an indication of how this is such a global topic and something that people are very interested in. So we're going to go through some housekeeping, just a couple of things. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about setting the stage for our main event, which is where Sandeep Dhillon, the CEO of Talentix, is going to take us through some of the ways in which marketplaces can be successful in enterprise solutions, enterprise programs. Then we'll go into Q&A, and then hopefully we'll have roundtable discussions. I'm going to deconstruct all of that stuff in just a second. First, I want to welcome our global audience. This is a listing of everyone who has chosen in the registration form to give us some indication of where they're from. I must say that I think in my entire 25 years of participating or leading webinar events, this is probably one of the most global audiences that I've ever seen or had. Everybody from the Russian Federation to Uruguay to the US to UAE, Slovenia, just an incredibly global audience. And that's something that makes me super excited. And I am very pleased to be able to share that perspective with all of you. Who is Defiant Solutions? Defiant Intervention Education is our event and educational arm of Defiant Solutions, Inc. We are a boutique consultancy. We focus on helping enterprises and emerging platform providers navigate this new way of work. And we harness not just our own personal experience, but a network of over 17,000 different resources and contingent workforce experts to bring the latest in insights, cutting edge ideas and solutions to today's talent marketplace. That's enough of my commercial. I'm done with that. I want to acquaint you with the AirMeet platform. You will see little graphic representations on the side. The other attendees list is on the right. If you want to issue us a direct message, you can click that little button and it'll send it directly to one of the folks on the phone or on the call. You'll see the little red alert button. That's where we have announcements and alerts, like if we announce polls or questions or calls for questions, things like that. On the lower left-hand side, you'll see little chat boxes where you want to share your thoughts with all the attendees in the event. If you want to put something in the chat box, say great point, what have you, that's the place where you do it. If you want to ask a question, post your questions there. We have Kenna's navigating our questions and she'll be posting them. One of the things I do want to call out, if you do post a question, you do have the opportunity to come up on stage and ask it live. So some of you have expressed a desire to kind of get involved. Well, this is your way to get involved. Then we're going to be posting polls. As anyone knows, I'd love to post polls and kind of get the temperature of what the attendees are interested in. And then finally, if you're tired of seeing that panel entirely, you press the little downward button and it will hide that panel from view. If you don't like the way the window is laid up, I know sometimes some browsers create this as a smaller window. If you flip those little outward bound arrows, those will expand to become full screen. So you'll be able to see the presentation in all of its glory and our faces in all of our glory by taking over the screen. One of the things to add is that we are also incorporating a roundtable discussion at the end. One of the reasons why we like the AirMeet platform is we feel it best replicates a live event where you get to connect with individuals and peers. And so in addition to speed networking, connecting one-on-one, we have roundtables at the end where allow you to jump on to an actual roundtable with other folks on the phone to be able to accommodate and connect and network and solve any sorts of problems. And finally, yes, this is a question that never ceases to come up. All the slides will be available to attendees after the session. For those of you who complete the survey, there's an after-action survey, and one of the rewards for the survey, in addition to a couple of other goodies, is to be able to get a copy of the slides that we're presenting today. To that end, I threatened a poll, so I'm going to go and show you how the polling works. And it's going to be my favorite question, which is, if you look on the right-hand corner, it says, what is your best superpower? Flight, reading minds, time travel, or super strength? So take a moment to review, and if we get enough answers or something that's interesting, we'll be able to share it with all the previous or all the attendees after the fact, or as we take these answers. To that end, well, I'll leave that poll open and we'll share it for a while. And you go ahead and say, I think what's really surprising is everyone's interested in reading minds, which is kind of concerning. Moving on, I'll go ahead and I want to show that real quickly. I just think it's fantastic. So far, 62% of you, 64% of you would rather read minds than have time travel, super strength, or flight. I don't know. I think I'm kind of partial to time travel myself, but that's just me. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and leave that poll open until we get our next one, and that'll be something we share after the fact. Thank you so much for taking the time to complete the survey. Moving on, back to the agenda. So my role in this is just kind of to set the stage and kind of give a little bit of the history and also kind of the current landscape of not just marketplaces, but overall talent solutions. Over the last 25 years, it's been a dynamic time and one of just a sea change in how work gets done, and an increasing professionalization in the role of contingent workforce management. We often have seen instances where in the past, it was simply the purview of procurement to manage services agreements and service contracts. Over time, we've seen more and more people looking at that as a transactional solution, something you would look with pens and paper or other office supplies, and to a really truly strategic and differentiated resource. And so it's a very complicated question. When we think at this, it is what I like to call the contingent workforce game. It functions like a game. There are winners and losers. There are players in this game. There are tools and solutions, and there's little different boards, which can be geographies, skill differentiators, business units. And so putting those pieces together has become much more of an art than a science. And there really is no one true way to do something. If we look at the evolution of business processes over time, organizations eventually discover the right way to do something. And it's no longer something where people are very interested in, discovering how to buy office supplies or figuring out a way to manage their travel programs. While that is certainly something that's very important, a lot of companies kind of figure that element out. One thing that's fascinating about contingent labor is it's really impossible to quote unquote figure it out. And the field is always evolving and the game is always changing. The rules are dynamic and the players are often dynamic with acquisition and new entrants and incredible amounts of investment flushing into the space. And so just to give you some indication, I kind of like to use this as a kind of a notion to give you some idea of all of the game pieces that you have at your disposal. When we are looking at contingent work, just a cursory back of an envelope analysis looks at 37 different individual elements, and each of those elements have several different components underneath it. Each of these things are things that program managers and suppliers need to be aware of as they're trying to navigate what's best for their clients and what they can do for their business. And what we're going to talk about today is not these 37. We're going to talk about talent marketplaces. Okay, 17 on this particular list. So we've seen a lot of headlines when it comes to the rise of marketplaces. When if we look back to some of us who've been in this business for a while, it was a purview of us nerds. But now with the rise of remote work, the fundamental decoupling of employment from a lot of people's current situation and the rise of the side hustle, more and more individuals are looking to talent marketplaces to monetize their own personal experience, or actually look at these to generate and capture the way their primary source of income. A cursory search of talent marketplaces on Google yields some 2.6 million results. And it's always a mix of internal marketplaces and external ones. To give some idea of the wide range of which organizations are leveraging this particular category, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of ways in which organizations can specialize in providing those talent services. This is a graphic from OpenAssembly, which kind of lists the talent ecosystem. As you can see, this is just a sampling of the some thousands and thousands of marketplaces that are going live or are live at any given time. Many of them are owned by staffing firms, but a lot of them are not. And there's a lot of them are independent. And we see tremendous growth. If we look compared to the global market for temporary services specifically, and talent marketplace in a lot of ways don't necessarily compete for that, but in a like for like, it's $453 billion globally is the temporary staffing revenue. Platform revenue for the same services is 11.9 billion. That's in year over year. The growth of talent platforms is 190%, a staggering 190%. In terms of the overall penetration of talent platforms compared towards temporary staffing, right now it's went from less than 1% in 2019 all the way up to 3% of the global temporary staffing market. So the growth is just absolutely exponential, and we expect it to continue. But at the same time, the buyer adoption has somewhat lagged. While it still is accelerating, it certainly is slower than what we see with other contingent workforce strategies. This is also from SIA. This is from their buyer survey, and as you can see, the kind of dark grayish blue, I think, is people who have a talent marketplace with a solution in place today. The next one is likely to be explored in the next 2 years, and then the other ones are the other colors are either not planning to do it at all, or I just don't know. So we see 20% of the surveyed companies, enterprises, said that they are using a talent marketplace in some form or fashion, and 43% intend to explore it within the next couple of years. So it is an absolutely nascent solution, even though these solutions have been around for some almost decades, literally. They're still evolving, and they still are penetrating major enterprise business, while their significant penetration is smaller to medium size. And that's what we're going to talk about today. At the same time, staffing firms who have the option to participate in this platform ecosystem can participate or not. So why do they not participate? One, they feel it's not right for their firm's sector or focus, or they feel like the technology just can't replace that personal touch. So the question to the attendees is do you align, or do these things jibe with you? I would love to hear your comments in the field. Why do you think staffing firms are not more aggressively doing it? And is this perspective of technology can't replace the personal touch, is that an accurate one? I mean, I think if I would have gone back many years ago, I don't know if I would expected to have my order placed at McDonald's on a touchscreen, but in many ways that's preferable. So that notion of people requiring a personal touch to delivery, or connection, or human connection to find an individual, is that something that's still relevant in today's economy, the way people get things done? And that's an interesting consideration. Okay, so now what? How do we go about leveraging these solutions? How do we go about incorporating these solutions into your overall talent strategy? And what can providers do to make themselves more successful? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and invite to the stage Sandeep Dhillon from Talmix is going to join me. And when he's coming up, there you are.
Sandeep, hey, Brian.
For joining us.
Thank you for having me. Very excited.
Before we get started, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, and then tell me a little bit about Talmix, and then we'll go right into your content.
Sure. Background-wise, I won't bore you with all the details, but I trained as an accountant a number of years ago with one of the top firms, worked in accountancy, consultancy, transactions, banking, and kind of landed into Talmix, which is a leading talent marketplace. So quite a variety of experience, but all kind of lends very well to really helping Talmix grow.
I'm certainly excited to go through today's discussion. We've been some tremendous material presented for us today, so give me a second to call that back up. And adding talent marketplace to the talent game. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to you when you say adding talent marketplace to the talent game?
I think the key. I think one thing we certainly noticed over the last number of years is, as you said, marketplaces are still relatively nascent in the industry. And within the HR ecosystem, everyone is really well connected. A lot of the solutions have been in place for a while. And it's really, how do we get this new way of doing things into that ecosystem, particularly as everyone is used to doing things the old way with staffing firms. So it's really adding another layer of platforms that can really add a lot of value into it. So that's really what it means to me.
And then we have a question from the audience. Let's go to, one of the things we really try and do is be really responsive when questions are asked. So I think one of the questions is, how has the pandemic influenced the need for a personal touch? Do you feel like the pandemic has fundamentally altered the way your business is operated?
So I think, and it probably leads to sort of one of the questions you had earlier with regards to what staffing firms think about platforms in terms of the importance of human touch. And I'll actually talk about it later as well. But I think the human touch is always important no matter what when it comes to providing talent into organizations. I think it leads into the amount of human touch, which will vary depending on the type of talent that you're looking for. But I don't think that need for human touch has gone. In terms of on the pandemic, I think the one thing that's really been fantastic, particularly as a company for us, is we're able to see a lot more of our clients because we work with a global client base and a global talent base. A lot of our conversations before were on email or phone, but it's great that now everyone is so adept with Zoom that we're able to actually connect with them more on a face-to-face basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Well, let's get right into all this great content you presented. So we talked a little bit about Talmix. Maybe you can give us some more detail and we'll go into some of the content.
Sure. I'll give a brief overview of what Talmix does and then really deep dive into marketplaces more broadly. So Talmix is a leading marketplace for global business talent. So that's the category that we focus on. We've got 60,000 registered on our network, and that network continues to grow every single month primarily through referrals, organic introductions as well. And typically the talent that we have on our platform have either consulting backgrounds or strong business operators as well. And we have a whole range of people on the network from a couple of years experience through to 20, 30 plus years as well. We are recognized as an industry leader by some of the top analysts in the space, Ardent Partners, SIA, Talent Tech Labs. And I think particularly one of the key things that stands out when we do have this recognition is a large part of that is also due to the purpose-built technology platform that we've invested a lot in to create an amazing experience both for our customers and our talent. We work with over 1,500 customer users worldwide across enterprise, private equity, and consultancy firms, very broad and diverse customer base, as well as a very broad and diverse talent base. And we have an open architecture on the platform, which really enables us to connect with the HR stack that our customers use as well. So a very future-proof and developing platform that we built.
Fantastic. Now that the commercial's over, let's get into some of the good stuff. So tell us what we're going to be talking about today.
So 7 key areas I want to talk about. Firstly, what is a talent marketplace, and hopefully be able to get that across a lot clearer, because again, there's a lot of confusion in terms of what defines a marketplace.
Yeah.
Secondly, how is that really different from a staffing firm, which again is another question that comes up, is why not just use a staffing firm instead of a marketplace? 4 specific reasons why it's more important than ever to actually start implementing or thinking about implementing a talent marketplace. And one of the other areas which is really important is what is the benefit to talent as well. So 6 particular reasons why it's very beneficial for talent and candidates to engage with a talent marketplace as well. And then stepping back on the landscape, Brian, you mentioned before the large number of providers are in the space. How do you actually go about navigating and selecting a marketplace or marketplaces to work with? And attached to that, what are the key questions you should be asking the marketplaces to see if they are fit for your business? And finally, a few sort of key areas, particularly based on our experience on how to get started and some key scenarios we come across when we work with large companies across the world.
A lot of stuff to get over in 40 minutes or so. So let's dive right into.
Great. So if we start with what is a talent marketplace, so here kind of visualize what Talmix is in terms of as a talent marketplace, but essentially nearly all talent marketplaces work off the same type of framework. There'll be variants in terms of how certain things are done, but broadly what the talent marketplaces are doing are connecting companies and talent for work opportunities wherever they may be. On the company side, they're looking for talent to support them and provide them with expertise for project or interim opportunities as the pace and change of innovation continues. And on the talent side, they're looking for new projects and new opportunities to support them in their independent and freelance careers. And on both sides, the way that Talmix is built up and a number of marketplaces is there is a very tailored user experience for the customer and also for the talent as well. And the way that we have it is 3 simple steps. On the company side, they post the requirement. What are they looking for? What are they looking to achieve? They then will have a list of screened available candidates to review, and then through to contracting process once they have once they've agreed who they're going to work with. And on the talent side, very simple in terms of registering, creating your profile. For Talmix, we call it the talent passport, which is very much a dynamic version of the CV that continually updates. also gives talent the opportunity to own their own data and keep their own data up to date. They can apply for opportunities and then also contract as well. So very simple on both sides. And what we do as a marketplace is connect the dots using technology, data, and service as well. And depending on the marketplace, they'll use a variety or different levels of each of these three aspects.
I think one of the things that when I try and articulate what a marketplace is it's a mechanism for enterprises in demand to connect directly to talent. And so unlike a lot of other mediums, the mechanism marketplace for the most part is primarily that connecting mechanism, the connecting tissue between demand and supply. Where people get mixed up is when they start, and we'll get into that detail a little bit more, where they expect that the platform is going to be accountable for certain elements of delivery. No, that's like Uber. The purpose of Uber, the example I use is Uber, is primarily a mechanism for connecting an individual to a driver at scale, developing that institutional trust. So what I'm going to do, we have a question from the audience, and I want to try this now, is we're going to try and call this person on stage. Matt Jessup from London is joining the stage with us. Let's try this function. There you are, Matt. Are you there?
Can you hear me okay, Brian?
I can hear you okay. You have a question for Sandeep and I.
Yeah, I do, yes. So you've just published a poll with it, which is a great question in terms of how organizations are using Marketplace, whether they're using them to complement MSPs through MSPs or independently from an MSP. My question is, do you guys believe that MSPs really understand Talent Marketplace and know how to integrate them into their programs for that even to be an option for their clients?
I'm happy to start, Brian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Matt, for giving us a really easy question to start with.
There are a few aspects of this which I'll cover towards the end when it comes to those scenarios, but certainly what we're seeing more of is MSPs are trying to understand marketplaces more. I think the challenges they have is, and again, many companies have as well, is differentiating what the difference is between a marketplace and a staffing firm. So a lot of the time when they're thinking about incorporating a marketplace, they think about it the same way as you incorporate a staffing firm, and there are some issues when that happens. So I think they need to look at it from a fresh perspective and think about how to fit that within the process and flows to make it more effective as well. Because if you take the exact same SLAs approach that you would if it's a staffing firm and apply marketplace, it actually won't work just because of the way that the engagement between the talent and the client is in place. So I think the education is happening and the appetite is there to understand because they understand their customers really need this solution. But I think it's taking time. Brian, do you want to add anything to that?
I think we need to differentiate between MSPs and program offices. I think that there's a lot of MSPs who have really robust strategies at the central level, but oftentimes these solutions kind of get missed at the program office level where most of the execution actually occurs. And sometimes they're often implemented incorrectly or they're implemented a long time a staffing firm. And programs like this need to have dedicated verticals or actually time to be successful. So in order for MSPs to evolve, they need to make sure that they all agree and they align with their clients on how to integrate. But at the same time, they need to make sure they educate those program offices on the best practices to be able to deliver those things and deliver those things successfully. So I hope that answered your question. I mean, we tried to.
Yes, thank you.
Without offending anybody. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and kick you off the stage now. This is the first time we got to do that. So thank you for being a guinea pig, Matt. You're a brave soul.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Great. So one of the other key questions is, and kind of leading on to what we were just discussing about, MSPs a lot of the time view marketplaces very similar to staffing firms. What are the actual key differences between a marketplace and a staffing firm? And we kind of see three key differentiators. One is the marketplace offers a more enriched experience, both to the client and the talent, rapid discovery of talent and speed to get people onto projects. Delivering work is extremely important, more and more as a piece of innovation obviously increases. And then the last part, active network as well. So I'll go through each of those. So in terms of the experience, Marketplace is really focused on creating a very connected, consistent, and streamlined client and talent experience using the platform as well as service. So if you're a client and you're accessing the TalentMix application, it's a very tailored experience to gather your requirements, to help you view profiles in a more consistent way so that you can make those decisions in terms of who you're hiring. And then on the talent side, it's offering a very streamlined, easy to use portal for you to add your information, keep it up to date, and access and find opportunities as well. So there's that. And if you think about a traditional staffing firm, actually they don't really have either. The client would call up the recruitment consultant, and the recruitment consultant would look at their CRM for potentially out-of-date CVs that are stored there, and then contact new candidates. Whereas in this scenario, you actually have an input method for both sides of the marketplace. That plus the technology and the data that's built up underneath. So making sure that we have the most up-to-date, reliable data on individuals, which they control. They're putting their information on the platform, looking at user interactions, and then using algorithms to match the data sets on what the client's looking for. And the talent really allows for a very quick review and access to talent that is available. Again, that's not really something that you get through recruitment firms. It is really just more manual, where someone is identifying candidates, sending across CVs, and then back and forth, primarily via email or phone. And then finally, and one of the really important points, is having an active network. With a talent marketplace, people register, put up their profile, keep it up to date, and let the talent marketplace know that they're available. That really allows very quick access to find the best people as well. There's no real way for talent to do that with the traditional recruitment firm. These three key areas are the differentiators, which really deliver a combination of speed to value, so getting people into projects as quickly as you can, very convenient in terms of how you access the platform, both for the client and the talent side, and then finally really precise matching and finding the exact type of individual that you need at speed.
And this is just another question. So I think obviously the differentiation between a staffing firm and a talent marketplace is relatively consistent. I think there's elements of it in terms of visibility into the process, both from a demand side, talent has the ability to see what's out there, and from the supply side, where enterprises and small to medium-sized businesses are able to see the talent that's resident in this particular marketplace. How would you say that a talent marketplace is different than, for example, a traditional consulting firm?
So I think that there's a core difference, I would say, and part of it comes down to kind of what a marketplace is built to do. So a marketplace is built to connect one side to another, and then the talent to actually deliver and do the work for the client. And with the consultancy firm, there's a lot of management of the process and delivery of the work directly. So they take a lot of ownership for delivering that end product and deliverable. What a marketplace does do, it does allow you more flexible access to talent. So if you wanted to go to a large consultancy firm, the fees are typically very high. They'll have a large team that comes on site, delivers the project. If you go to a talent marketplace, you can access very similar types of talent, but more sort of ad hoc, on demand as you need to. And they can not only deliver the strategic outputs in terms of what you should be doing, but fundamentally, they can also work with your team and actually deliver the outputs as well. And that's one thing a lot of the time consultancy firms are not able to do. They can give the strategy, but actually delivering and helping your team deliver the work is something that they don't do. There is absolutely a place for consultancy firms. We work with a number of consultancy firms and provide them with an agile talent bench as well.
I think one of the things I want to highlight as we're looking at this is that, again, the mechanism of a marketplace is to connect buyer to seller. And that transaction between the buyer and the seller is a separate contracting process, where a lot of enterprises make the mistake, and we see that as we work with more and more companies, is to hold the marketplace themselves accountable for what is traditionally considered a consulting firm or a staffing firm, as opposed to just the quality of the match and aligning and verifying the individuals. I think that's an interesting distinction, and one that I'm sure we're going to dig in a little bit later as we go through this.
Great. Next slide. So now just coming to like why would you think about implementing a talent marketplace now, or at least considering it? Just looking at the top right-hand side, this is data from LinkedIn. So change in skill sets for jobs since 2015, about 25%. So these are the types of new skills that are in place. The projected change in skill sets by 2027 is 50%. Essentially, the types of skill sets that people will have and need to have for new workplaces, new work models, and innovation is changing at a very significant pace. What that means is that you need a quicker way to access this type of talent that can deliver on these projects and initiatives for your organization. So because that pace is so high, and if you look at the other stat there, this is from, I think, HBS and BCG report, 90% of business leaders believe that on-demand talent marketplaces will be somewhat or very important to their organization for that future competitive advantage. So to be able to deliver on the change and the growth objectives that they will have. And so there are 4 specific reasons, and I'm sure many of you will recognize these reasons, particularly now as going through the pandemic and the changes that we've seen. Firstly, talent is harder to find. So 91% of companies are already using outside platforms to source talent for some of the business critical work. Skills are becoming more specialized and continue to change, as I've just talked about. Rapid innovation requires this. So not only do you have to think about how do I upskill my team internally, but how do I bring fresh skill sets constantly into the organization, which will involve external talent. Remote working is absolutely here to stay post-pandemic, and that's been driven by the pandemic by sorts in terms of companies are now fit for purpose for working with remote employees, but at the same time, the talent as well who are looking for more meaningful work and also are more selective with what they work on a go-forward basis as well. And then finally, flexible workforces do both drive and deliver this new workforce model as well. So talent shortages are absolutely one of the key areas for adopting this flexible workforce. Although it's one of the key areas for adopting it, they're actually seeing a lot of the value coming out of that in terms of having people available on demand. So because of all these trends, following on from COVID and pre-COVID, these trends were happening. COVID has actually just accelerated the pace of this as well. So I think it's very important that you think about how can I quickly bring in the right types of skill sets and talent going forward, because talent marketplace is certainly one of the key channels that you're able to do that.
Okay, fantastic. We have a love the questions. We got a question. I want to go ahead and share one from, we'll start with Garston. So with the growing number of such marketplaces that are available to talent, how do you envision this landscape to become more user-friendly from a talent point of view in terms of connected marketplace where, for example, an independent contractor can update the resume only once? You know, when we looked at that slide, there's hundreds and hundreds of ways in which people can monetize their experience. A lot of times people go through the process of registering with several marketplaces, which creates a number of challenges for the provider side, right? Because you have multi-homing as an issue. But how do you see that evolving, how these solutions become more interconnected, if at all?
So that's a really, really good question. So I'd say a few things. So firstly, it is painful for individuals to continually update their CV and send it across to recruiters. Marketplaces make it easier because they can do it through an online platform, so it's a little bit easier. But you're correct in terms of as more and more marketplaces appear, you have to continually update and put your information into different spaces and different marketplaces. Now, the way that we're approaching this is we created the Talent Passport, and the way that we're structuring that information is we want it to be connected to other open source or other areas where you can validate information and add to that passport as well, and something then that an individual can either take to a different organization or connect with another platform as well. So I think the key part here is, for us in particular, we're really focused on building a strong data set on individuals, but a number of those data points will come from other platforms and other services. And I'm going to use the B word, blockchain, in terms of validation as well. So as long as you have a lot of other interconnecting services with open APIs, and as long as platforms like us continue to use more of an open API framework, then you should be able to connect all the dots across the different marketplaces.
I think there's a couple of things. I think one, from the talent side, that is always going to be a challenge, but I think it's a challenge for the marketplaces themselves to be able to make it as easy as possible to sign up. Many marketplaces incorporate elements of directly porting to LinkedIn, for example, and pulling that data in and creating a portable CV or reading the CV directly. It's very, very frustrating as a talent to be able to have to go into a site and load your CV, but then have to answer questions manually. I think technology needs to evolve. At the same time, from a marketplace perspective, multi-homing is a real challenge because it's so easy to register with multiple locations. So being able to keep a curated list of people who are suitably engaged and available so that you know that they're available, being able to create a unique experience and a connected experience and put arms and legs around those folks is also a strategic goal for these, for many marketplaces, in addition to making it easy as possible. Great question, Karsten. Really appreciate it. Keep those questions coming. And we have more to go over, but just for the sake of time, we're gonna keep on going. But I'm gonna talk Paul and Radhika. We see you. We're gonna corp you in just a second. So let's keep going. The
Great.
Super 6.
The Super 6, so benefits to talent. 6 of the areas that we see as adding a lot of value to talent in terms of using marketplaces based on what we see from the client side and also from the talent side as well. So firstly, it's global opportunities, and more so now because companies are now open to hiring more of a global remote workforce as opposed to before where a lot of focus was finding someone in your city or in your specific area. So if you, and again, this is also marketplace dependent, I would just caveat that. So we are a global marketplace. Right now, we've probably got 30 to 40 countries at the moment in terms of project work. If you log into our platform as a talent, you would actually be able to see projects all the way from the US through to Japan. So if you access a marketplace, you can actually access global opportunities. So if you're looking for experience in different countries, different geographies, and you've got that skill set, you're able to do that. It's not something you could do with a regional talent marketplace or with a staffing firm where you just don't have that visibility. Transparency on fees and the process as well. So really, as we were referring to earlier, because marketplaces are really focused on creating that more direct connection with support between the client and the talent, there's a lot more transparency. So rather than speaking to a recruitment consultant that may not give you all the information or sanitized version, and then also in terms of fees, we're very transparent, as many marketplaces are. So really creating a high level of trust between the client and the talent as well. Access to development resources. So aside from just projects and opportunities, some marketplaces, including ours, offer a whole host of services, and that can be things like discounts to insurance or access to workspace. So if you are freelancing and you come from a consulting background, you just don't have the services, the discounts, the opportunities outside of project work that you typically have. And so we're very focused on building that ecosystem with other providers to provide that support. Another particularly important area is contract risk. So if you're a freelancer, a lot of the time you may be using your client's contract. You may not exactly know what you're signing up for. With a marketplace, a lot of the contracts are standardized, so that risk is reduced. And we very much look at making sure it's a balanced relationship when it's related to contracts between clients and talent.
Real quick, Sandeep, the contract is still between the worker and the enterprise buyer or the buyer, not necessarily between the worker, you, and the buyer, unless it's a very specialized circumstance, correct?
Absolutely. So talent on our platform typically have their own indemnity insurance, have their own coverage for work, etc. But we offer the templates in terms of what the actual contract looks like. So it really provides them with that security. And tied into that, the payment security, because marketplaces have vetted the clients, the need, the projects, the opportunities that come through as well, and then also manage the payment process, then there's a lot more security rather than you as an individual having to chase a specific team and an organization to get that payment as well. And then finally, the support and the feedback as well. So that's really how can you be successful in your independent career and accessing new opportunities. And again, that's something that we very much focus on, is making sure people are putting their best foot forward and also are getting the best opportunities and the support throughout that process as well.
Fantastic. We have a question from the audience. I'm going to go ahead and throw up, but it's one that I think we know the answer to, but I think it's important to point out. Is the concept of a marketplace global? Is it possible to have a freelancer work from anywhere? What are your thoughts? I think over the last couple of years, it certainly is. This question's been addressed and answered in many ways, but it's still evolving.
Yes, it's a good question. I mean, I think if you look at the early marketplaces like Upwork or Fiverr, these have been truly global marketplaces. So offering people access to design services, copywriting, video production. A lot of the people that you would hire through that platform are in different regions, geographies to deliver that work. What we saw pre-pandemic was because of the nature of work in terms of project-based, business-related, critical work objectives, there was still a high reliance on on-site individuals. What we're seeing post-pandemic is there's a lot more flexibility now in terms of sourcing people more. So if anything, more than ever now, it truly is global across all work categories, not just the early categories, the ones that Upwork and Fiverr covered.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can think definitely the rise of remote work has given more credence and more validity to these marketplaces playing a really strategic role in many companies' program strategies overall. Thank you so much, Radhika. Next slide, selecting a marketplace.
So as we talked about earlier, and as Brian showed you, the huge ecosystem of providers, it can be quite daunting when you look at the provider landscape, if you look at our SIA or other talent tech labs in terms of what that space looks like. So there are a large number of marketplaces, but there are concentrations of certain types of marketplaces across particular job categories. So I think the first thing to say is, if you are going to implement a talent marketplace, you may need to implement more than one, or you may need to implement one. It really just depends on what talent categories that you're looking to address. When you're thinking about which marketplace to go to, it really just depends on where you're going to see those frequent needs. So here I've kind of identified 4 different categories. There are many more. We as Talmix work in the business talent category. So that's things like business executives, subject matter experts, consultants. You also then have marketplaces that are really focused on developers, UX designers, product managers. You have freelance creatives, WordPress, corporate videos, etc. Those are companies like Upwork and Fiverr provide that. And then you have gig workers, which can include field technicians, cleaning services, catering. So there are different marketplaces across different verticals. I don't anticipate that there will ever be one company that does all categories, because there are many differences in terms of how you engage with the different talent categories that would make it very difficult for one company to deliver that high quality service. But I think if you're thinking, what should I be implementing and how should I be selecting it? What talent categories do you need? What skill sets do you need? And then look at the particular sort of areas that you, particular areas to see what talent and marketplaces are in that category as well. And I'll cover it in a bit more detail in the next slide in terms of this specific.
We have a really good and I think a really appropriate at this point to talk about the composition of the workforce that does this. This is from Paul Gilbert. Using a talent market, what do you think the estimated breakdown between 1099 and W-2 is?
The talent market estimated percentage breakdown between 1099 and W-2. I could not. Does it come with an answer? I know that the number of 1099s continues to grow and is very significant compared to W-2. I don't know, Brian, if you've got.
I can take that, Sandeep.
Okay.
I think the vast proportion, for the most part, the vast proportion of talent that exists in many marketplaces are engaged as 1099 contractors. I think of many of the platforms that I personally work with, the vast proportion of them are. There are certainly some distinctions. They usually incorporate an element of validation that person is a valid IC. For anybody who is in the space, you know that's a very complicated question and one that takes many, many layers to get to. There's no easy answer. In some states, for example, like California, Massachusetts, New York, where there are very strict rules around engaging people as independent contractors, the proportion of people who are engaged in that locale or in that locus are probably going to be considered W-2 employees. So it's important that a platform, if you're going to be hiring people who work in that state, be accountable for those W-2 and engaging those folks as payroll. Where it gets more complicated is when you're starting to hire people who are outside of your jurisdiction. Say you hire somebody in Romania and you're in Atlanta. Usually that person is engaged in an IC, and the risk to you as the enterprise buyer is relatively minimal, unless you have a tax nexus or an entity in that particular country. Then you do have some sort of exposure. If you're hiring somebody through the system and they're located in a place where you don't have anybody, there's not a whole lot of case law that supports a significant amount of material IC employment risk if you don't have a locus in that region. Overwhelmingly across multiple platforms, it's for the most part, vast proportion as I see, especially.
I think commenting from a talent's perspective, particularly on our US projects, that more than 90% are 1099, and I'd say there are very similar issues across the UK and other markets. So in the UK, we have IR35 and payrolling, very similar as well in terms of changes in regulation, which has meant that there is a slight increase in full-time staff in the UK versus the IR35 or the 1099 equivalent, but we don't anticipate that changing on Talent Marketplace. I think Talent Marketplaces will still continue to be majority sort of 1099 or contract based.
100%. Remember, that's the function of the marketplace. The function of the marketplace is to connect a buyer to a seller, not necessarily employ the individual. But thank you for the questions. Keep them coming, guys. Moving on, selecting a marketplace.
So once you've kind of looked at the landscape to see, okay, which talent categories do we need to access and who the companies are, these are just a list of sort of 5 specific questions to think about, and also questions you should be asking the marketplace as well as you kind of think about making that selection. So firstly, do they have the right talent categories that you need? As I mentioned before, different marketplaces focus on different talent verticals. We're very much focused on business operators, consultants, etc. But if you're looking for marketing executive or specialist, again, you might want to go to a different marketplace. Or if you're looking for copywriters, or specific platforms that do copywriters as well. And then the second part is in terms of the talent coverage, is it aligned in terms of region or geography? Or if you're a global company, you will likely want access to a global marketplace, because there's no point having a local marketplace in one region and another local marketplace. That's one of the advantages of a marketplace versus staffing firm. Historically, you'd have to hire different offices of the staffing firm, or alternatively find a different recruitment firm in a different market. The whole idea of a global talent marketplace is that you're going to one place globally to access that talent wherever they may be as well. So thinking about what your short, long-term needs are, and specifically regionally, globally, or if you've got hybrid options as well. The third part is really the human support. And so as I kind of mentioned towards the start of the presentation, there are variants of this. We provide human support as part of the service because of the complexity of the requirements and the critical nature of the work. So if the nature of the work is simpler, more straightforward, there's a high volume of talent available, the matching is relatively straightforward, the screening is straightforward, then you may not need as much human support. But as you kind of move up in terms of complexity, that human support is required. So it's important to think about, if I am going to go to Talent Marketplace for more complicated or varied needs, will they be able to support me with individuals to get through that process as well? And then the functionality wise, does it have the right functionality for users? Are you looking to use it as a single user? Do you have multiple users? Is it fit for purpose for your business use? And also, is it future proof? And by that, there's no harm in ever asking a talent marketplace, what does your roadmap look like, or what are the specific areas that you'll be developing on? We're always more than happy to share our high level objectives in terms of development, which is really based on client and talent needs. And it gives you a clear indication as to where that product and platform is going. And then finally, how flexible are they in terms of fitting within your program? We appreciate we go to companies and they have a huge HR or talent stack, may include MSP, might include FMS, might include VMS. We need to figure out how to make that work for the client in a flexible and easy way. So I think it's really important to sort of ask that question about how flexible they will be, because you wouldn't want to implement a product that then just becomes very difficult to manage on your own. Brian, do you have any comments on the last point, particularly as it relates to
I do. I really do think this one thing is this number 4, which is the right functionality and user experience. I think I can't emphasize that enough. Making sure that the user experience, not just on the client side, but on the talent side, what is the customer journey across all of the different dimensions? And also, I always use not just any user, but I specifically think of the most difficult user in my particular program. When I was running a program, I always had one particular end user who worked in the CEO's office. They were the most difficult candidate and most difficult person to work with. And I always incorporated them and included them in the supplier selection process. So I was thinking if I could get, Joe Bloggs on our side, then everybody else will fall in line, or it'll be easy enough for everyone to use. We've all been trained to work with Amazon and through our banks how to interact with technology. So that interface is absolutely all the more important. We have one more question, another question on this end about selection, which is how do marketplaces handle the 1099 vetting challenge, the IC vetting challenge? Obviously, this is very US centered, but we do have IR35 in the UK as well.
So for us specifically, what we do is we rely on other companies that do this as specialists. So we very much see Talmix as finding the best talent on demand to deliver at speed. When it comes to other things, for example, background screening, 1099 vetting, we rely on people who do that already and are best in class and connect with them. But the most important thing is making that client experience very seamless so that they don't need to worry about that part. So we work very closely with other suppliers in the ecosystem to allow that to happen. I think if a marketplace takes on too many different parts of the ecosystem, they won't be able to focus on what they are really good at doing, which is really connecting the dots. And as I mentioned sort of earlier as well, in terms of validation and verification, one of the things that we are exploring is connecting with outside data sources to validate information with talent as well. So again, cutting out the sort of compliance and the vetting piece that you need as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Chris. And one of the things, many marketplaces are incorporating third-party technology into the system. So to Sandeep's point, it becomes a seamless experience. So they're trying to develop their own. I know a number of talent marketplaces are looking to develop their own features and functionality to be able to do that sort of thing and have that embedded in the technology overall. But it really is going to be based on the enterprise client's risk tolerance and how they choose and how risk averse they are, or how opposite they are to being engaged as folks as third parties or as independent contractors. Thanks so much for that. How to get started?
So this is the last slide. So really, this is just based on our experience with working with enterprise and other firms. So I think there's two different ways to look at it. So working with hiring managers, and the way that we split this up is, when should you think of it just going direct to a marketplace rather than not going direct? So if you're a hiring manager, you have your own budget, decision-making power on hiring on-demand talent. So you've got your own choice of suppliers. It's relatively easy. You can start using a marketplace directly if you have that remit. Now, where you don't have the authority to hire and those decisions are made more centrally, either by HR procurement, I think the most important thing you can do is introduce them to the talent marketplace early on so that they can actually go through your company process as well. The thing that we've seen before is, starting to work with a hiring manager who thinks they may have the remit, but then you end up in a place where you've delivered the individual and then it goes through a very lengthy process where they're not sure if they can actually take the person on board as well. So it's really important to kind of think about that up front. Now, on the human resources or procurement team, thinking about when to kind of have it outside of your main program that you may be hiring contingent labor or on demand versus in your program, which is really essentially MSP, VMS side. So I think a few considerations here, and they're kind of just either or. So if you're looking for a limited number of marketplaces for your business, because your hiring managers don't have access to that category coverage, and there's a risk of them going rogue, which a lot of the time they do. So based on the left-hand side, when they go directly rogue, because they're not getting that access to your central program, where the talent needs are likely to be complex and require significant interaction, particularly between the user and the talent marketplace, and that putting them through more intermediaries may slow down the process. So a lot of the time, as you kind of get to some of the more higher skilled or more detailed work that's required, a lot more back and forth is typically required between the individual and the company, and therefore more interaction with the marketplace. So in that scenario, it might not always be best to introduce more friction into that process. And then the other part, very simply put, are you likely to have infrequent or limited needs? In which case, there may not be any point in putting it through a very detailed program if you're only going to use them a few times. So those are kind of a few considerations when thinking about it outside of your MSP, VMS, or other programs. If you're thinking about it as part of your program, well, if you're looking to use multiple marketplaces, it may not be practical to have them outside your program. You may not want all your users to have access to 10, 15 different logins for different marketplaces. The role of the MSP is really to kind of integrate that and simplify that and make it easier for your users. So it may be better to have that as part of the program. If you're likely to have high volume or regular needs, very clearly sort of defined projects or types of profiles, having it through a more centralized program absolutely makes sense. And then also if you want a more centralized view of non-employee talent, and you've already got systems in place that do that, and you would rather connect them through that process, again, that's another area. Now, these are just sort of some high-level considerations. It's obviously very individual to a company in terms of how they approach it. I think the key thing that we see, particularly for human resources procurement, is really about how do you get control of that spend and stop all the individual hiring managers kind of making a lot of different decisions and using a lot of different platforms. Because the more platforms you do use sort of outside of your standard programs, there clearly will be some wastage on that front as well. So it's really important you work out how to best do that.
I think this is, since this is our last slide, let's go. We have a question from the audience. Well, appreciate if you're making it easier for the talent across many marketplaces, but how can we make it easier for a client to utilize many different marketplaces, especially if they use an MSP and a VMS? This is something that's really timely considering the comment you just made.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely a great question. So just kind of leading on to that, and probably something we touched on very early on, it's really, does the MSP really understand how to integrate a talent marketplace versus a staffing firm? So really appreciating what the differences are as it relates to contractual relationship, but then also in terms of process flow as well. Now, and then it also leads to, is the talent marketplace themselves flexible enough to kind of fit within your program? So I think it's dependent on the talent marketplace to be flexible as part of the program. It's then also dependent on the MSP to work out a way on how to implement a new type of solution, because I think the core goal of the marketplace and the MSP is obviously to make the client's process as easy as possible, because the last thing anyone wants is to have multiple systems, inefficient, and a lot of friction as well. So I think it's really that education piece and working out a more standardized approach on how to integrate a talent marketplace into that program.
I think one thing also about this particular question, Des, is that I think that it's important to recognize that each marketplace has a particular perspective and market niche they're designed to fulfill. And so one of the reasons why you go down this route is not necessarily to think about managing the same way, about having dozens of suppliers to fill a wide range of roles. It's about finding the right talent marketplace partner that fills a strategic niche within your program, and then dedicating certain elements of the program to that particular niche player so that they are much more likely to be successful. Where a lot of these programs fall down is when you just shotgun requisitions across dozens of marketplace solutions, and then you're buried in responses, and then you're left with navigating dozens of CVs or candidates being presented to the hiring manager, and that creates a relatively chaotic situation. So one of the things I think is really important is to recognize that every marketplace that you have has a very particular and strategic bent, and looking at them almost like a primary channel for that particular category of spend. Which is one option to keep that consistent. That brings us to the end of our time, at least dedicated time. But now we have a couple of other questions, and we want to keep them coming. So many questions are fantastic. Sandeep, I'm going to go ahead and call up a great question by Araya. Is there any rating scale for talent and for employers as well, like other industry marketplaces? So is there a way for, if we think of like Airbnb, right? There's ratings for the host, and there's ratings for the hostee, or the people who are staying. Do you see, or is there any sort of ratings native within these solutions so that talent can vet their opportunities, not just the opportunities vetting the talent?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, really good question. I think this is one thing that always comes up with when you think about marketplaces. If you think about the high scale end of Upwork, Fiverr, where there's a high volume, and also the individuals are doing multiple transactions during the year. So they may have 50, 60 projects in a year, whereas if someone comes to us, they may only have 2 or 3 large projects during the year as well. So in terms of the opportunity for feedback, it's actually a lot lower when you think about that talent category versus the other talent category. In terms of the Upwork Fiverr talent category, you can therefore get a good feel for a rating if it's out of 5, because you've got that volume coming in, and so some of the bias then is reduced. Now, if you've only got 3 people to potentially review you, then having a very simple sort of 5-star rating doesn't work. So you need something a lot more nuanced. So what we're working on is really having more qualitative feedback on individuals. At the same time, we do also elicit feedback from clients as well. And again, if you think of it from that side, the volume and level of feedback on clients will also be quite limited on both sides, even if it's an Upwork or a Fiverr, because it would typically one buyer using multiple individuals. And so it's really important to have nuanced feedback rather than just simply looking at it as a 1 to 5. And I think across all marketplaces, I think the quality and the precision of the feedback and the type of feedback will change over time, particularly as companies are looking for skill sets and experience as well, that they will want ratings on how good they are at this type of work or this type of work. Also, how good are they culturally? How do they fit within the team? So there's a lot more attributes than a very simple scale. It's a very long answer for that question, but I think the key is it's evolving and it will become more nuanced over time.
Well, this was fantastic. We are at time, but hopefully stick around a little more. You can contact us. We'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. You can email us or call us if you want to carry on the conversation. We certainly hope that you will join us in the roundtable sessions. This is also another really popular way for if you're interested in kind of nerding out a little more, talking marketplaces, talent strategy, or just in general, connecting with your peers, continuing it. We hope you'll join us at the roundtables afterwards. We are also obsessed with how do we do. So everybody who completes a survey will not only get a copy of the presentation, today's presentation, they'll be entered into a drawing to win a Defiant Events and Education Yeti mug, which will be the envy of everybody at your local Starbucks and something that your kids take from you to use on their way to high school or school. Join us next month for a first of our Defiant webinar series, where we are going to be joined by Eric Rumbach, attorney from Michael Best, Hacking the Contract, 5 must-know tips. This is going to be a new sort of format. What we're going to do is we're going to solicit contract drafts or contract copies from the audience in advance, and we're going to deconstruct those and kind of give you negotiating or sort of highlighting some ways in which you can improve that from a provider perspective or from a buyer perspective. So don't miss it. It's really something really cool. Again, we are fascinated and obsessed with your feedback, so please take a moment to complete it. And without further ado, we hope you'll see us in the roundtables. Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you, Tomix. Thank you, Kenna,
Thank you.
For your tremendous support. And we'll see you at the roundtable sessions.
Thank you, everyone.